Okay, good afternoon. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This afternoon, I'm really thrilled and honored to have a longtime guest that I've known for many years, Paul Saffo. Paul, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here. Though I've always thought your program, instead of being Hsu Untied, it should be Hsu on the Loose. But just saying.
I like it. I'll keep that in mind. So, Paul, you are a futurist. Tell me, what is a futurist and how does one become one?
Well, I prefer to. I have more or less given up on trying not to be called a futurist, but my preferred term is forecaster. So
Uh-huh.
I focus on social and technological forecasting and its larger implications. So basically, I stand on deeply understanding Moore's law, exponential phenomena, looking for where the fast water is, and then trying to figure out what that means for society, for governments, and the like. These days, I'm spending most of my time looking on geopolicy issues.
Huh,
But
interesting.
in general, I've been in this business for a while. It kind of happened sort of by accident, though with perfect hindsight, it makes perfect sense. It's sort of what I was headed to do all along, starting freshman year of college. But I've been in the business long enough that, I refer to myself as a futurist with a past.
Well, there's no profession of futurist forecaster. I mean, how did you even come up with that
There
notion?
actually is.
Oh,
There is an association of professional futurists. I'm not a member, but
oh,
I love what they do. And there's a large, large professional body of people who actually are full-time futurists. There was just a big global meeting in Dubai, the Dubai Future Conference.
oh,
And then I'm on the board of something called the Millennium Project, which is a global group of futurists that was started by the United Nations,
huh.
and I'm my one of my big projects at the moment is I'm co-editor of something called the Future Methods Manual, fourth edition,
Huh.
which is about 1,000 pages long, 50 chapters. Each chapter is about a different formal future method. The original chapters, this is the fourth edition, the original chapters were written by the pioneers. So Ted Gordon, who pioneered Delphi method and like, it was all started.
Hmm.
The field in its modern form really starts with the Rand Corporation in the 1950s and a
Hmm.
gentleman named Herman Kahn. My doing policy stuff is kind of a natural part of what it is, and it grew out of the Rand Corporation. Then other famous futurists, Al Toffler, who wrote Future Shock
Hmm.
and the like,
Hmm.
and it's grown since then. When I started in the business in the mid 80s, you could have taken all the prominent futurists in the world and fit them around a table at one of our local Chinese restaurants in Palo Alto. It's a little bigger now.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, tell me a little bit about the long now. I was in San Francisco the other day and I stumbled onto this really interesting looking restaurant and I thought, what is this long now? I walked in there, saw
Sure.
a bunch of stuff about
Well,
a 10,000 year
not a
clock.
restaurant. It's a bar
It's a
called the
bar.
Interval,
It's a bar. Yeah.
and it consistently gets in sort of the top 4 or 5 bars in the reviews in San Francisco. Um, Long Now is just 25 years old. It was Danny Hillis had this interesting observation. So Danny Hillis, who's a brilliant computer scientist and an inventor, he noticed that when he was a kid, the future was synonymous with the year 2000. And when he was 15, the future was still synonymous with the year 2000 and in college. And he realized that the future was getting shorter by every year he was alive. It was still the year 2000 in the 1980s. And he thought, gee, what can I do as an antidote to this short-term thinking? Because obviously there's more to the future. And being an engineer and an inventor, he thought, well, I'll create an object. And what's a way to make people think long term? And he had this vision of a clock that would last a very long time. And most people thought he was quite mad. But Stuart Brand thought it was quite brilliant. And then Stuart invited a couple of us to join. And so I've been on the board more or less since it started. And it was the original project was this absolutely outrageous idea of building a 10,000 year a 300-foot tall mechanical clock in a mountain,
Hmm.
and it's mostly built.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but figuratively speaking, is a clock that ticks once a year, goes bong once a century, and the cuckoo comes out once every 10,000 years. Um, 10,000 years as a concept is as interesting as the clock. Uh, Long Now got its name from Brian Eno, who's a friend of Long Now and was on the board and the like. And he said, we're living in the big here, and the big here is obscuring the long now.
Hmm.
And so that's how we got the name. And then I think it was Peter Schwartz who said, gee, 10,000 years is about the right time frame. Why I like 10,000 years is it's kind of the longest time frame that is comprehensible in terms of human culture.
Hmm.
10,000 years ago, our ancestors were coming out of hunter-gatherer society for the first time and beginning agriculture and the beginning of the urban experiment. And it's also about the shortest interval of time that makes sense to a geologist. That,
Hmm.
that there are some things that happen more quickly than 10,000 years. You and I both live on different segments of the San Andreas Fault, and the future arrives awfully quickly when an earthquake happens. But 10,000 years is sort of where human scale time meets geologic time.
Hmm.
And above all is the notion that we're not at the end of history, with apologies to Frank Fukuyama, who was consistently wrong. And we're not at the beginning of history. We're probably somewhere in the middle.
Hmm.
That's why 10,000 years.
Interesting. So, who funded this clock?
Oh, we're a membership organization. We have several
Oh.
thousand members, and then we have several large donors who fund on a project and a support basis.
Huh.
And all the details are on the website.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But suffice it to say, the 10,000 year clock is in a mountain on Jeff Bezos's ranch in Texas. So you can probably guess who funded that particular clock. By the way, the clock, first of all, the clock was just our first project. It's not our only project. We have a whole bunch of other ones. And our goal is not to have a single clock, but to have multiple clocks. And I invite people, go to the website, look at the
Yeah.
videos. The design behind it is quite remarkable and actually made real contributions to the field of orology. But since we were talking about the clock, let me
Yeah.
share some thoughts that came to me after 25 years on the board.
Okay.
Um, and I stepped off the board last year, and we all agreed that we view the first 25 years as our first quarter.
Hmm.
And so a whole bunch of us at the board had planned originally, we're going to get off the board at 25 years, hand it to the next generation. Like a couple of things that I discovered. One, I've always thought that time capsules were kind of intriguing.
Hmm.
And in fact, so here on my shovel, we reach down to it. There's a long, interesting history of time capsules. One of the most interesting is this book, which is from the World's Fair, New York World's Fair, the time capsule of Cupoloi, and 1930s.
Hmm.
And what they did is they created a time capsule that's very futuristic looking. I just love the picture. I think there's one in the back here. Let's just see if they got it. It basically looks like a fancy torpedo made out of some exotic aluminum alloy by Westinghouse, and they can put into it everything they thought was essential to describe civilization and the future and all their hopes and dreams. And they buried in the ground in Flushing Meadows, New York. And then they published all these books. This has the contents of the time capsule in it. And they gave these to libraries all over the country.
Hmm.
And in the back is a map with directions of how to find the time capsule,
Hmm.
which is kind of neat. And you think about time capsules. Well, what I've learned over the years of looking at this, time capsules are a singularly dippy idea. They really annoy me now. They're really stupid. They're useful to an archaeologist because they say more about that moment in time than they say about the future. And there's a wonderful history of people having ceremonial openings of time capsules, in the county courthouse and the like, and they're on the lawn and the digger's ready to dig out, and they dig and they can't find it. And pretty soon you've got gopher holes all over the line. You can't figure out where the time capsule is. So one thing I learned is time capsules are useless. Also, uh, if you really want to send a message to the future,
Yeah.
don't send it in a physical object.
Hmm.
Send it in. Uh, I would say what you want to do is send it in a oral history. So think about Homer, the Odyssey, and the Iliad. The way to send a message to the future is to keep it alive and tell each
Hmm.
generation after another. And, I was thinking the other one is, are you familiar with what's called the Song of Seculos, the
Mm-mm.
Seculos epigraph? It is the oldest song we have. It goes, I think it's 3,000 years. It was found on a stela in Ephesus. And while there are older songs, we have um, stuff like Gilgamesh. The song and the tune were preserved on it, so we can actually perform it the
Oh,
way
wow.
it was written. It's one of the most beautiful, beautiful passages in Greek literature. Very
Hmm.
short, very touching. You should listen to it. So that's the other message is if you want to send a message to the future, don't write it down. Get somebody to tell a friend. And that had practical applications. I worked in the 80s on the issue of how do you warn people about nuclear waste dumps? Because we
Hmm.
thought we would have a bunch of these. And there was a wonderful project, the Human Interference Task Force, which spent several hundreds of thousands of dollars and all sorts of experts. And I've got the 2 volumes on my shelf, all these different ways to set warning signs. Turned out that the best way to do it would be what was written in a science fiction novel, Canticle for Leibowitz. Start a religion, and the message in the religion is don't sit your ass on that pile of nuclear waste
Hmm.
and carry it through. Of course, the moment you have a religion, then that means 10,000 years of bake sales and opportunities for heresy and the like. So that was that. And what would be another lesson? I think the most important lesson is this, and it applies to my profession as a forecaster. There is a tendency, and I once believed this, that thinking long term is an intrinsic good. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does.
I mean, we always say, don't think short term,
Yeah,
be
yeah,
long
yeah.
term,
Right.
you're a good squirrel, hide your nuts in the tree for the winter and stuff. Well, I've come to the conclusion some time ago that long term thinking is not intrinsically good.
Hmm.
Long term thinking is a tool, and it's a tool that can be used for good or used for ill.
Hmm.
And now, with apologies to Nolan Bushnell, he famously observed, we both remember his quip that was made a bumper sticker, "He who dies with the most toys wins."
Hmm.
Well, really, the motto should be, "He who thinks the longest wins." He or
Hmm.
she who thinks the longest wins,
Hmm.
because there are ample instances of people thinking very systematically long term with results that the rest of us really wouldn't like. A
Hmm.
case in point is the U.S. Supreme Court composition at the moment. Key lesson, thinking long term is a very powerful tool, and it can be very dangerous as well as very good.
Any others?
Couple of rules of thumb in foresight. The one that uh, keeps getting credited to me, but it's a folk saying that I learned when I was a young child from a rancher who lived down the road, and that is never mistake a clear view for a short distance,
Uh-huh.
especially here in Silicon Valley, where, for us in our geek culture, someone invents something, it seems so obvious they don't need marketing, they don't need sales. And in fact, it, of course, is not that at all. Just because something seems obvious and inevitable doesn't mean it's going to happen right away. Now,
Right.
both of us live out here in the West, and I'm sure you've spent time out in the Nevada desert. And, you have the basin and range problem. There's a mountain and then a distance to the next mountain. There you are, you're standing on a ridge looking at a distant mountain. And in that clear desert air, it seems so close. You could reach out and just touch it until you start making your way towards the mountain and you discover it is a lot longer off than you expected. So never mistake a clear view for short distance, except with the exception, if you're an entrepreneur, absolutely make mistake a clear view for short distance. Otherwise, you'll never do anything.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but also so the also the future tends to arrive late, but also in unexpected ways. And at the end of the day, especially when it touches technology, everything takes forever to happen all at once. You get that everybody wants to draw an S curve, and a pet peeve of mine, speaking as a member, a former member of Stanford faculty, even engineering students don't understand inflection points. And everybody points to the wrong spot where the inflection point is, but that's aside. But the moment things start to take off, they're going to take off a lot faster than you imagine. So you have a whole bunch of people standing around waiting for something to happen. And then when it takes off, they get blown back and somebody steps in and, you know, steals their lunch.
Well, Paul, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate hearing some of your insights about the long now, and maybe sometime in the future you can update me on it then.
Sure. Drop by anytime.
This is Richard Hsu and Paul Saffo. Thanks.